Hello and welcome to another edition of Global Tantrum. I am your host, Steve Halley. With me, as always, is my co-host, Professor Galen Jackson. Galen, how are you?
Good man. Recording on a Friday evening, new for us. So just been a long
It's a little
work
different.
week, and we've been waiting for this one, I guess, for a few weeks in the short term and for over a decade in the long term.
Yeah, it's cool. We took a couple weeks off. Totally fine. Nothing important happened, right, Galen? It's like slow, couple of slow weeks especially in the Middle
You
East.
can always bank on the Middle East to be
Yeah.
totally silent while you're gone for a few weeks.
Yeah, basically, as soon as we put up the episode on the Great Power Draft, which I enjoyed doing, by the way, Israel-Iran kicked off and the United States got involved. And yeah, this has been a sort of Damocles hanging over, I guess you could say, our careers from the beginning, especially for
Look,
you.
I remember the first time I ever was a TA in grad school at UCLA. I was like teaching some students who were older than I was. We were working on this issue. So that was in like 2010.
Yep.
And it predates then. So it's been a long time coming.
It's been a long time coming. We had 12 days of fairly brisk air war between three parties, and seems like things have died down for the time being. We have lots of thoughts about what's going to happen next. We'll get there when we get there. First, let's just step through the basics. Like, what happened when during this 2 week period that we just went through?
Yeah, I might get the exact date wrong, but I think it was June 13th is when
Mm-hmm.
this kicked off. There's still much we don't know, and there will be much we don't know, I imagine, for some time. In any case, the Israelis decided to do it. They have threatened to do this for years. I myself was somewhat surprised, if for no other reason than they had not done it in the past and they still did not have the capability to finish the job themselves. And as we'll discuss, it might turn out that the United States did not either, but we do not know that just yet.
We'll
Uh,
get there. It's funny. I sent you a text with a link to an article about how Trump was basically starting to say things like, well, the Israelis could go off at any time." And I was like, this is clearly some kind of negotiating ploy, right? And like literally in the next hours, Israel starts hitting Iran. And I'm like, never mind.
Yeah, and I forget where I was. I think I was in a meeting, and so I only saw the text without the article, and I was like, I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, then you
When
do.
I got out of the meeting, I was like, oh, this is as big a deal as there can be right now.
It's momentous. Yes. So
um,
there were supposed to be negotiations. It's somewhere in the Middle East between, the negotiators of Iran and the United States, but did not happen.
yeah, and there have been, or I've seen some analysis or speculation that the Israelis did this to preempt those negotiations, or maybe there was coordination with the United States. Look, I can't rule that out, and maybe we won't know for sure for some time. I'm skeptical that that's the case. Um, I'm sure the Israelis alerted the Americans somewhat in advance, but I'm skeptical that this was done purely to derail the negotiations. I can see, I also, you can tell all sorts of stories. You can tell a story that this is about Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, trying to stay out of prison, since Israel does actually put its leaders in prison if they break the law. I don't think
Ehud
that's
Olmer, right?
correct.
Yep.
I don't think it's that either. I think this is something the Israelis have considered doing for a long time, and for a variety of reasons we can potentially get into. They maybe thought this would be a good opportunity to strike, but I could be wrong about that, and we might find out. Here's what I think we know. And feel free to chime in if I forget some of these details, but Iran has a pretty broad nuclear infrastructure. There's a number of important sites. The ones we know that were hit were Natanz, which is generally the, I don't know, sometimes held up as the crown jewel of Iran's nuclear program. It's the site where Israel and the United States used cyber sabotage back in the sort of late 2000s.
Stuxnet.
Stuxnet. That's a uranium enrichment site. The analysis I've read suggests that one was very badly damaged. I think there's general agreement on that because that one was pretty exposed. And the Israelis seem to have done a masterful job of eliminating Iranian air defense. It seems as if the damage at Esfahan was also very severe. Esfahan was important because it was the conversion facility. There's two parts of that. One, when you mine natural uranium, in order to enrich it, you have to convert it into uranium hexafluoride gas. You stick that in a centrifuge, it spins really quickly. That's how you separate out enriched uranium. That seems to have sustained heavy damage. The Israelis also hit Arak, which is a heavy water site, which was already decommissioned, but potentially down the road, because it uses heavy water, could be used to produce plutonium for a bomb.
Hmm.
That one sustained a lot of damage as well. The key one, and this is where the United States got involved and where we don't know yet, is Fordo. And I'm sure if people are interested in this, you've heard about it. That one was significant because it was built into the side of a mountain. And Israel did not have the bombers or the bombs, as we've discussed on a past episode, to do that one themselves. And so this is the Operation Midnight Hammer, which these operation names continue to get more ridiculous in my mind. But that was where the US got involved, was dropping its bunker busters. That one, you and I have seen different analyses on. The intelligence analyses I've seen on it are somewhat at odds. I don't think we know yet totally what the final state of that facility is, but at a minimum, it sounds like it suffered damage. Whether it was completely destroyed, I don't think we know just yet. So I think that's, when it comes to Iran's nuclear infrastructure, the state of play at the moment.
Yeah, that is correct. And a fun little fact about the bombing run on Fordo, they dropped these massive ordnance penetrators, the mothers of all bombs, the I think 15-ton bombs from the B-2s, and we've talked about this stuff in another episode about how Israel would need the U.S. to drop these to quote unquote finish the job on this specific facility on Fordo. They dropped them into ventilation shafts, kind of like Star Wars. So, like Luke's run on the Death Star, right?
I'm gonna have to defer to you, man. I haven't seen Star Wars in a long time.
Yeah, like like they're in the trench and like he has to like get it into the anyway. Everybody's seen Star Wars. It may have been a while, but yeah, we dropped these bombs on this facility. It's not clear if it was completely destroyed or if the centrifuges still work. At a minimum, it's going to be tough to get into that facility for at least a little while. We know
Yeah.
that much. In the meantime, Israel also struck plenty of other targets in Iran, and Iran responded with plenty of ballistic missiles. They fired 500 ballistic missiles into Israel. The vast majority of these were intercepted and did not produce a lot of damage. The United States stepped up and helped, multiple overlapping layers of missile defense. But Israel did get hit by 20 to 30 ballistic missiles, which is not nothing for a country the size of Israel. I think of Israel as kind of analogous to LA County. I live in LA County. I used to live in LA County. LA County has about 10 million people, same number of people. Geographically, it's not that much smaller than Israel. But if you're comparing like the built up areas, that's where the missiles go, right? Imagine hitting the built up areas in LA with 20 to 30 ballistic missiles that can destroy a city block each. It's like, that's kind of a big deal, right? That would
Look,
cause problems.
the reporting I've seen says Israel has sustained about $3 billion in damage, a lot of money, and something around 24 Israelis have died as a result of those attacks, which
Yeah,
Israel takes casualties very, very hard because it's such a small country. So
exactly.
certainly the Israelis have gotten the better of this fight, but they have sustained some damage.
They have. They degraded with their airstrikes Iran's capabilities to, well, certainly to protect itself with air defenses. They achieved air superiority over Iran as a result of this new attack early on. And then they just kept hitting them. They kept hitting all kinds of like facilities for launching missiles, creating missiles, power plants. They were hitting targets in Tehran. They were hitting scientists. They were hitting generals.
I was going to say
Just
they eliminated they've killed a number of high-ranking Iranian generals, and I think I read 14 nuclear scientists.
Yeah, they definitely Iran's deep in the bench now, for sure. The Ayatollah Khamenei went underground, literally. He just reemerged. with a video that you were watching before we started recording.
Yeah, I always think it's good to watch these speeches, just to get a feel for the delivery. In his case, I think he's 86.
He's 86.
And suspicion is he has been ill for quite a while.
Hmm.
So there wasn't a lot of oomph behind the speech. It was a weird speech.
Low energy.
It's low, yeah, low energy. It's good. Low energy and like a weird declaration of victory
Yeah,
for a country that has definitely gotten the worst of it, and the retaliation against U.S. bases in Qatar was largely symbolic.
it was.
Now
Yep.
we'll get to. I don't think either of us thinks this is the last of to be heard on the matter. Other important things. So, in terms of what we don't know. So, as we said, we're not totally sure what the total damage to Fordo was. It seems considerable, but it's not totally clear whether it's completely out of commission. Arguably, two other factors, which we've been talking about, seem even more important, which is back in April, there was new satellite photography showing Iran doing more construction on a site near Natanz, which, as we said, was destroyed, which we're going to call Pickaxe Mountain.
I like that because it sounds like a Disneyland ride.
Yeah, and
The world's
also,
worst Disneyland ride.
at one time I was decent at Arabic. I don't do Persian, so I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. Kolong Gazla Mountain. So yeah, let's go with Pickaxe. That reportedly is a site where they can install new centrifuges.
And may have already done
May have
so.
already done so. Um, and that site is important because the analysis I've read is that is beyond the capacity of even the US bunker busters. The only thing that could be able to get that one, which we'll talk about, would be a nuclear bomb.
Hmm.
And the second, and I don't know what your feelings on this are, I guess I'll let you weigh in. To me, which is the single most important thing we don't know, is where is the 900 pounds of 60% enriched uranium that we know Iran has, which is enough to produce roughly 10 nuclear bombs if it is enriched ultimately to 90%.
Where indeed. Yes. So
So,
we were told retroactively by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth that this was in fact not an objective, not a target. And it's fine. We don't know where it went, but it's not a big deal. I think JD Vance also in an offhand comment was like, yeah, we're not sure what the whereabouts are. Trump, for his part, said that it would be too hard to move. First of all, Trump is wrong. He probably knows he's wrong. He's probably lying. It's not that difficult to move enriched uranium. Uranium is very dense. So this is actually not a large volume of material at all. And it could fit inside of a car, is my understanding.
so look, every time I teach the basics of nuclear physics and delivery systems, things like that. It's what kind of delivery systems there are, bombers, submarines, ICBMs. How about a truck?
Yeah.
A uranium weapon of the kind that was used on Hiroshima, you only need about 20 kilograms of 90% enriched uranium. They absolutely could have moved this in a truck or a car. It would not be too difficult for them to have done that.
And in
So,
fact, prior to the strikes, we saw a line of 10 trucks, lorries, basically, semis, outside of whatever facility this is, Esfahan. And I'm thinking, if I'm the Iranians, I hide this stuff in one of those 10. So it's going to be tough to figure out which one it is from the
yeah,
air,
and,
right?
and it would be completely unsurprising that they would have done that. Like, of
Yeah.
course, they would have moved it as the danger of this crept forth. So the head of the IAEA says he thinks the Iranians still have it. A number of European diplomats have said they think the Iranians still have it. That would be my assumption.
Yep.
And if that is the case, as I think we've talked about before, going from 60 to 90% enriched uranium, in other words, to bomb grade uranium, does not take very long.
Yeah. The hard part is going from 0 to 20, right?
Correct.
Rough. It takes a long
As
time.
the analogy I've heard nuclear engineers use is imagine you've got, a bucket of marbles, one green, one red. Once you've taken out a bunch of one color, it gets relatively easier to locate the other. So the amount of work to be done, I think, is something in the neighborhood of a week and a half if they have a centrifuge cascade. And I think you and I both think they probably have some spare centrifuges somewhere. Whether they're installed or not is another story.
Yeah.
Um, but
So are
that
you thinking what I'm
problem,
thinking?
well, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that the uranium and the centrifuges, those spare centrifuges, are at Pickaxe Mountain, which nobody talked about. Not Netanyahu, not Trump, not Vance, not Hegseth, none of the Israeli generals, none of the Iranians. Nobody's really talked about it. It was not hit because we can't hit it. It's too deep under the mountain, under the titular Pickaxe Mountain. Yeah, I think it's there, and they're probably going to get a bomb. That's what I think.
So I have no idea where it is, to be clear.
Yeah.
And if I did, I'd probably be getting paid a lot of money by the CIA or something like that. What I do think is that they have it. And
Hmm.
whether it's in one place or multiple places, I couldn't tell you where that place is. But I guess this is where we get into the so what part. I have been saying for a while that, I think obviously there will be costs if Iran decides to cross the nuclear threshold, right? North Korea has nuclear weapons. The US has basically tried to cut it off from the rest of the world
Fairly successfully.
fairly successfully. So, will there be costs if Iran decides to move forward? Sure. And maybe that's why they've preferred this threshold status that they've been at for a while now. At this point, I think they have so little to lose that I have been puzzled for months that they haven't decided to move forward. And maybe that was them seeing whether Trump was willing to do a different deal. I had hesitations or doubts that those negotiations were going to succeed, as I know you did, if for no other reason than the United States and Iran had a deal and Trump unilaterally tore it up,
Yeah.
um, which is why this is now front and center again today.
Well, he did something even worse this time, which is open a 2 week negotiation period and then sucker punch Iran 2 days into it with Operation Midnight Hammer or whatever the hell it's called. So it's like, why would they ever want to negotiate with us at this point? I would expect them, if anything, to lie about wanting to negotiate and then do a nuclear test in the middle of that. That would be like turnabout is fair play, right?
So look, like they're not there yet.
No,
So in addition to needing to enrich this 60% enriched uranium to 90%, which by the way, we would be talking about boosted fission weapons on the orders of hundreds of kilotons, and certainly not hydrogen weapons in the megaton range, truly city busting weapons. We'd be talking sort of about bombs roughly,
Hiroshima,
yeah, Hiroshima sized bomb, which
20
that's
big.
a nuclear bomb, 20
Yeah,
kilotons, and we've all seen the photos of
what
what
that did.
happened there.
Yeah.
Um, but just to clarify what we're talking about, so they still need to do that. If they want it to be deliverable, they have to figure out how to miniaturize a warhead to put on a ballistic missile. That is not a straightforward process. That's a difficult engineering job. And it seems like the Israelis successfully targeted their weaponization labs. Now, they obviously, short of killing every Iranian nuclear scientist and every explosives expert in the country, can't get rid of the knowledge of how to do that. I suppose Iran could have a crude gun type weapon that was dropped on Hiroshima, which would not take a lot of effort. So Iran hasn't crossed the finish line yet. There would still be some hurdles to clear. And I suppose you think there's a story that Israel has so thoroughly penetrated Iran's security services that maybe it can locate this stuff and get their hands on it themselves?
Maybe. I mean, I just think that they've shown themselves able to kill anybody in Iran other than the supreme leader with impunity over a long period of time. So if they're able to do that, why would they not be able to locate a uranium stockpile? But maybe this is like qualitatively different in some way. Maybe
Yeah.
they have different people on it or a much smaller circle of people on it. the nuclear program as a whole, if you're talking about scientists, like, they have public lives, they're more exposed. They're not living in like a secure compound or anything like that.
No, I mean, you and I were texting about this last summer when the Israelis assassinated, I think it was Ismail Haniyeh,
Oh
the
yeah.
leader of Hamas, who was in a safe house in Tehran. The
And they
Iranians have
killed a
had
bunch of they just killed a bunch of other people in Tehran too.
Iran clearly is having trouble defending their assets.
Yeah.
Um, this does seem different, and it would be a real risk or a real gamble to assume you can track all of this down. But if we assume that they can clear these last hurdles, yeah, at this point, I don't see why they wouldn't go for the bomb.
Yeah.
I don't
And
think
we
they have
think,
anything left to lose at this point.
so they've got to get the uranium to the centrifuges. That's probably going to take some time if they haven't done that already. They want to do it safely, quote unquote safely, which is hard because the Israelis have achieved like, some level of penetration clearly. Maybe that takes a couple months. Then they have to enrich uranium. That's pretty fast. That's happening inside a few weeks, probably. Then they have to build the device. You don't just want to build one device. You probably want to build multiple devices. If you're doing like gun type, little boy type bombs, maybe that takes another month or two. We're probably
If
out
if
towards,
that, just so
yeah,
people know, a gun type weapon is you've got two subcritical pieces of uranium that you just shoot into each other and go
yeah.
supercritical. It's pretty straightforward.
It is, but like you need to balance the explosive lenses and so on. And the Israelis killed the explosive lens guy, is my understanding. So that's kind of rough. Anyway, or is that the implosion weapon?
So that's
I think.
that's that's what I thought you were getting. The lenses typically are the implosion device, which is much more difficult. An
Oh, that's the
implosion
plutonium
an
device, isn't
implosion
it?
device is where you've got conventional explosives in a sphere. The
And
core
it
of it is
squeezes it.
uranium, and they have to detonate at exactly the same time to squeeze it. And that's much more challenging. A gun type weapon,
Got it.
my understanding is like most high school students could pull it off.
Yeah, I experimented with some explosives, especially in junior high and grade school. Not so much in high
No,
school.
I mean this is getting a little off track, but like this was one of the nightmare scenarios with like Pakistani command and control. Is like if someone breached a Pakistani facility and their nuclear weapons are made out of enriched uranium, that you might be able to even like drop one piece of uranium onto another piece and get a low
Oh my
yield
goodness.
that way.
Go critical, huh?
Um,
Okay. All
so
right.
that,
So
but yeah,
if
if you
we're
want to miniaturize it and put it on a missile, now we're talking about much more challenging
Yeah,
explosives.
they obviously have an advanced ballistic program. When you mount heavier warheads, then you need more throw weight, right? We've seen this in North Korea where it's like they test the warhead underground, then they test the ballistic missile with the throw weight for the warhead. They know that everybody can do the math. So then the math is okay. I take the missile they just tested. We know the rough magnitude of the warhead. We know how much it probably weighs. I do the ballistic math. Okay, they can hit the West Coast now, or at least we're worried about it. So we would see sort of that sequence from Iran, I assume, where it's like you have like one or two underground tests, and then you have like the biggest ballistic missile they have, right? They do that. And then we put two and two together and we're like, okay, they can hit, well, certainly Israel. Maybe they can hit
Right.
Europe.
They could also do, it's a little more difficult to like demonstrate this, but if they didn't want to actually test a nuclear bomb, they could do what's called a cold test, which is testing a nuclear weapon without having the fissile material in there just to demonstrate that you've actually mastered the explosives involved. But the point is, like, assuming either Israel or the United States cannot track down this stockpile of highly or 60% enriched uranium, and that you can't stop Iran from ultimately mastering the weaponization process. And both of those things would be huge gambles. I tend to agree with you. I think at this point, Ayatollah Khamenei probably is thinking that's his best bet.
Yeah, he doesn't have a lot of other options other than capitulation, which doesn't seem super likely. Why would he trust the United States and Israel at this point? He's got no incentive to do so. Like the credibility just isn't there.
Well, this is where I guess I'll ask you, and I think over text we were maybe not on in total agreement on this, which makes for a better viewing experience. Are you skeptical that there's a chance the United States, assuming the ceasefire does not hold, and whether it
Yeah.
holds in the short term, again, I don't think this is the last we're going to hear on this topic,
Yeah.
um, that the United States could conceivably find itself in a position where it's again pursuing regime change in the Middle East.
Right. No. So again, I think it's instructive to look at the North Korean example as being most analogous. Now, North Korea had a number of other protections against regime change that Iran doesn't enjoy, in particular, being able to annihilate Seoul, the capital of South Korea, inside of an hour with artillery, not even needing a nuclear weapon. Right. So they were already a lot safer from this. But I think that Iran is a country of 90 million people. Like, it's really big, bottom line.
It's much larger than, I mean, if you're talking about, I'm not talking about an invasion. I don't think
Yeah.
anyone's talking about an invasion.
Then what are we talking about? Like a decapitation strike?
Yeah, something like that.
I think
Um,
that whatever we would get after it would be worse and probably some kind of military junta or dictatorship in the form of the IRGC, right? Islamic
that
Revolutionary Guard.
that might be true. And to be clear, I think it would be a bad idea to go this route.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think like Khamenei like at least paid lip service to the idea of not going nuclear for a long time because there were theological arguments against it. He has that history. And you can make of that what you will, but it's something. It's like the IRGC, like these guys are different, man.
so Khamenei, my basic take is like that guy is he's the real deal in terms of anti-Americanism.
Oh, for sure.
um,
Yeah.
but he is not someone who is impervious to cold calculations of power.
Yeah, he's not a big
Um,
risk taker, I would say.
Correct. I would say actually he's quite cautious.
Mm.
And so, to the extent that you're saying might get replaced by someone more radical, I don't know how it would turn out. By the way, it doesn't have to be an assassination. You know, it could
He's
be
86. We might get regime
whatever.
change anyway.
Totally. But I tend to agree with you. It's not clear to me that what comes next is better, and it might very well be worse.
Yeah.
But you know, Trump did whatever the hell we're calling tweet now
Mhm.
about regime change. I am not persuaded by the argument that he'll be restrained by his base that's more skeptical of U.S. military intervention. He might ultimately agree with that sentiment, but I don't think that's going to restrain him. I think he has a complete stranglehold on the Republican Party and get away with doing basically with whatever he wants. Yeah, my question is if this is not a resolved issue, and I would argue that it is not, contrary to the president and frankly consistent with what we've heard from most of the intelligence community, even about Fordo, I could see the temptation being there to try to square this circle by saying, all right, they might try to get the bomb. What we really need is a friendlier Iranian government. I think it would be a bad idea. And
Yeah.
um, my coming of age moment as a politically aware person was the absolute catastrophe that was doing regime change in Iraq.
Yeah.
So I'm with you, but I'm less convinced that that's out of the question than it sounds like you are.
Let's talk about the mechanics of that. What would that look like? You said that you didn't think it would take the form of an invasion. Doing it from the air, it's like decapitation strikes. I don't think you get the regime change that you want unless you manage to get all of the military
Some
guys.
sort of popular uprising. Here's the problem. Iranians remember U.S. interference in Iranian politics, and so I
Yes.
don't know how many friendly people you're going to get trying to do that. Iranians themselves have a lot of experience with protesting this government, and generally those protests have been met with hard force.
Live rounds, in fact.
So you look that you're right. That is a I can't dispute that point that the
Yeah.
mechanics of doing it are not great. It does seem to me like Trump has somewhat boxed himself in on this at this point.
Oh, you mean he hasn't thought through the consequences of his
Yeah,
actions?
well,
I've never seen him do that before. It's crazy.
And
that
look,
he would just,
I don't know to be clear, but like I tend to think that's right. Like
yeah.
the reporting that I have seen on this was that his first instinct when the Israelis started striking was we're going to stay out, and then when it
Yeah,
looked like it was working, he I literally have seen this analysis that he got like FOMO
right.
and was like, I want to be in on this successful military operation. So I'm just saying it's not out of the question to me that we could conceivably find some path that leads in that direction. What path that is, I could not tell you.
Yeah, like regarding the domestic opposition in Iran, the Iranian government is legitimately super unpopular with the Iranian populace. The Iranian populace would love to see the end of the Islamic Republic, and it's a population that has, I think, democratic aspirations, and it's well educated and capable. These are people that are proud, and
And a generally young population that
that's right.
was born into this situation and has not really enjoyed. And
They have not flourished.
there
Yeah.
have been major protests in Iran in 1999, 2009, 2019, 2022. Like there have been multiple times where Iranians have risen up to protest this government in mass.
My understand like I don't know that much about this, but my understanding is that there's no head of a organized opposition group. The regime has done a good job making sure that doesn't happen. And so the potential of the like a popular uprising remains inchoate. And we would
That's
need
my
to,
sense. Yeah.
yeah, we or the Israelis or somebody would need to cultivate that. Leaders would need to come forward. Maybe we need training, maybe we need arms, we need to buy off like different people in the military and organize a coup. We've done it before in Iran successfully. Get the Shah in
1953.
there. Yes. Right.
Correct. Now,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, even then, like
All of that takes time.
no, look, I'm seeing your point. I am also seeing decades of misguided American policy in the Middle East. And
Yeah,
so,
we've put our foot in it so many times, but like the prospect of doing Iran like we did Iraq, you
yeah.
like an
No,
invasion.
and it wouldn't look like that. And by the way, I mean, just to further argue against my own point, the other problem here is that when it comes to the levers of power, the conservatives really dominate, with the exception of the presidency. That's been the case for a while. I mean, Khamenei, after the death of his predecessor, Khomeini, during the 90s and especially during the 2000s, moved to really consolidate his position. And the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is now kind of in the commanding heights of Iran's economy and dominates all the security services. And those guys are more than willing to use force to suppress uprisings. So, yes, it's a stacked deck. But, Trump did say on social media, hey, we know where the supreme leader is, and we're not going to kill him for now. So,
Yeah, but like what utility would that have? He's probably going to die soon anyway, right? He's pretty old, not in very good health. It's like then
yeah,
what happens?
he might, reportedly has prostate cancer and has,
Yeah, like Netanyahu and Trump both have alluded to it's time for the I think Netanyahu literally says time for the proud Iranian people to like rise up and take control of your destiny because you've been downtrodden for so long. It's like that is true, but what are you doing to assist that? He's like doing stuff that actually makes it harder, right? Because generally what happens when a regime gets into a war is you have a rally around the flag effect, and it's we just saw how many come on TV and declare victory. I don't know how plausible that is for the people in Iran. Not very, but he had to do it. And he needed to express defiance because that's the official policy, especially if the IRGC is now effectively in control, even if it's not official. My understanding is that when Khamenei went in his bunker, he basically delegated power to a some kind of council
mm,
of these IRGC guys, right? So
I missed that report. That's interesting.
yeah, and it's like he came back. So does he have power again, or is it still these other guys? Effectively, a junta. It's a military dictatorship. Like IRGC is. paramilitary. It's like there's also a lot of ideological indoctrination that goes into that.
It's the origins of it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's Praetorianism, right? They are military and they have at least a paramilitary structure. So it's then you get a military government. Sometimes military governments can actually be more conservative
Okay. Well,
than
all right. Let's say you've persuaded me.
okay.
I don't know if you've persuaded me that there won't be
An attempt of some kind.
some delusions that this can happen, or that
Yeah.
people aren't thinking about it actively right now somewhere in Washington.
Or Tel Aviv.
Yeah, fair enough. But maybe you've persuaded me that it's not going to happen, or if it does happen, it will have no effect. Is Iran going to bide its time and one day, as India and Pakistan did in 1998, say, hey, we just tested a nuclear weapon? Or do you expect to see some sort of breaking of this ceasefire or escalation in the meantime? On the one hand, Iran tends to not take these sorts of things without retaliating in some way. On the other
Mm-hmm.
hand, you could argue this is as vulnerable as the Islamic Republic has been since it came to power in 1979. These sites have been hit. Israel has seemingly completely annihilated their air defense, and their proxies have been really shut down by the Israelis since October 7th. One notable thing has been there's been a lot of quiet from the Syrians, who previously would have been backing the Iranians fully.
Arguably, this attack from Israel could not have succeeded other than by going through Syrian airspace, which is now wide open. I think that's how they did it. It's like they cleared the airspace because Syria doesn't have a military anymore. Israel destroyed it
And
after the regime
Syria is
change.
no longer an Iranian ally.
Correct. Also true. So, yeah, they're out of the fight. Hezbollah hasn't done anything. Hamas can't do anything.
I don't know if
Um,
Hezbollah can do anything.
yeah,
They've been,
the Iraqi militias haven't done much. The Yemenis, the Houthis, they've made some noises, but we haven't seen anything yet.
yeah.
So
So, would your expectation be, given all that, Iran's gonna try to find a way to cross the nuclear finish line and then look out? Or do you think,
maybe. So here's what I think. I think Iran's going to go quiet for the time being. I think that they will work on nuclearization. They have no reason not to at this point. And
they have every reason to do so?
exactly. Yeah. They have affirmative reasons to do it. I think Israel will start hitting them again, one way or another. They'll start assassinating people, bombing. I don't know what Trump will do or say when that happens, but I assume that's going to start happening pretty soon. And then Iran will probably respond in some way to that. And
Yeah, I mean,
then
I'm going to ask you a pretty tough question right now. Like, what is Trump's angle right now?
his angle.
Like,
So
what's
his angle was trying to get a Nobel Peace Prize. I don't think that's going to happen. He's like kind of systematically gone through all the conflicts. It's like, he tried to stop the Ukraine war. That's not going very well. He stuck his beacon on India, Pakistan, and India really didn't appreciate that. Pakistan super appreciated it and nominated him for a Peace Prize.
I hadn't heard that, but that's
Yeah,
hilarious.
it's really funny, man. He's gunning for his Peace Prize because Obama got one.
And yeah,
And so,
Obama got one for not being George W. Bush.
yeah, so now we're at Israel-Iran, where he orchestrated the war via tweet. It's like, everybody stop, we're done. It's like,
Yeah.
Israel, turn around, don't drop those bombs, right? So we have a ceasefire. It's like Israel dropped like one more load of
And
bombs and
and
we
he said
stopped.
on live TV, I don't know what the fuck Israel and Iran are doing.
Yeah, they don't know what they've been fighting so long. They don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah,
It's
like,
like,
it seemed like his plan initially was, all right, we're going to do Fordo and finish the job and then try to get a deal. But then he was like, now we don't have to do a deal.
right.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what his,
Let's talk about diplomacy though. Yeah,
yeah.
like we've kind of written it off just because there's no remaining credibility. Is that actually right though?
The only way to me that's right is if the Iranians are willing to surrender. And everything I know about this Iranian government is that that is not going to happen, and
Yeah.
that this has probably strengthened the hardliners and the conservatives.
That's what
And,
it looks like to me
as
too.
is typically the case, there's the supreme leader and his conservative allies, and the president tends to be more moderate. That was the case going all the way back to the 1990s with Rafsanjani, and certainly the case with Pezeshkian. Um, I don't think that's. I was already skeptical. I don't see a way that happens now,
Yeah.
unless they come out and wave the white flag, and I just don't think that's going to happen. That the
Yeah.
moderates have been further discredited. By the way, we've seen this movie before. How much this was actually going to happen, I'm a little skeptical, but there's the famous story after the United States invaded Iraq in May 2003 that the Iranians, through a guy named Mohammed Khatami at that time, moderate Iranian president, was
I
willing.
remember him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, yeah. I mean, he was viewed as a reformer when he was first elected in '97. Ultimately, kind of was a disappointment because the conservatives outmaneuvered him. Um, but reportedly made this kind of grand gesture to the Americans, and I've never really seen the details of what was in the plan, but willing to negotiate. And Khamenei told him, "You're wasting your time. The Americans are always out to get us." And the Bush administration proved Khamenei right in that circumstance. I just don't buy it for a second that the Iranians are just going to surrender. And I don't see how they're going to negotiate. I mean, why would they? Had a deal. The current president of the United States unilaterally tore up that deal, and now they are having their nuclear facilities attacked by him and Israel. So what's left to negotiate?
Yeah. Nothing. Yeah. Yeah. To answer your actual question, I assume that this war is going to restart at some point, probably in the next couple of months, because Israel, I guarantee you, is going crazy right now, trying to find that uranium, trying to locate those scientists.
The United States probably is too.
Yeah, I assume so. The like under this administration, the United States tends to take its eye off the ball.
Yeah, Israelis are also very good at intelligence in the Middle East.
They have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they can find it somehow and actually put this program, because if they can get that uranium and they can get those scientists, then it will actually stop the program for a long time. Because a lot of the centrifuges have been destroyed. And what that means is they can't get new uranium easily. But with the stockpile that they have, they can make bombs along the lines that we've already discussed. So it's like the job's not done.
So if that were to this was always the case from the skeptics of a strike, right? That even theoretically, let's say that happened, the Israelis seized the 900 pounds of 60% enriched uranium, whatever, they could kill off even some more nuclear scientists, that you would still be faced with this question again in a matter of years. I mean, Iran has uranium mines, indigenous,
Yeah.
so it can mine it itself. It could rebuild. It would be expensive. It would take some time. They'd obviously have to replenish their trained core of scientists, but um, it's not like they couldn't rebuild the program.
Yeah.
So even then, under the best case, and it's probably something like 5 years. Which, 5 years, maybe if you tell that to the American public or to the Israelis, they say, great, we'll take that. That's enough time. A lot can happen in 5 years. But even if that were the case, the problem wouldn't be totally eliminated.
Yeah, no, it won't be other than regime change. We don't see a good avenue for regime change. There are lots of bad avenues that will result in just more problems. This new facility that they've built at Pickaxe Mountain, there's no way to bomb it other than with nuclear weapons. We had a quick discussion before this show started about whether we think Israel
I,
would do that if they
I
had
want I
to.
want to hear your thoughts on this because
So my thoughts on that are basically yes, I think they would. I think they would hit this facility with a nuclear weapon if they felt that it would stop the program, which is crazy. That's a crazy thing to say, but I think they'd do it.
look, I think I agree, and
Yeah.
I have been not necessarily laughed out of rooms, but been viewed very skeptically for saying that. But I think if the Israelis with a high degree of confidence thought, hey, like this is the facility that has to be hit to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear bomb, if it weren't in an urban site in particular, I could see them using a tactical nuclear weapon to do it.
Yeah. And
And
that's what it would
and
take.
just
That's
to
what it
be
would take.
clear, Israel does have nuclear weapons.
They could do this if they wanted to. They have said their doctrine is Israel will not be the first to introduce nuclear weapons to the Middle East. That is their declared doctrine. They could spin this as being like they were about to introduce nuclear weapons, so we
Yeah.
we came second. Yeah, they have them. They're just in the basement. They have not been introduced.
Yeah, and even that, the reason that doctrine exists is one, to relieve pressure on their potential enemies in the region and give them a face-saving way to not
Go
be pressured
nuclear.
into going nuclear themselves. But if they viewed this as an imminent threat, who would care? And the second reason is that's an agreement they have with the United States.
It might
And
compromise their relationship with the United States if they did
yeah,
this.
and I'm not so sure at
Yeah,
this
at
point.
this point, I mean, yeah, it's hard to say.
It seems like there are very few lines the Israelis can cross and
Or
trigger a U.S. punitive response.
very few lines that they can't
Sorry,
cross.
can't
Yeah.
cross. Yeah,
Well, the way you said it also made sense.
yeah.
But yeah, this is not over. I am more likely than not, we will see an Iranian nuclear test relatively soon, I think. Probably by the end of the year.
That's where you're at.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm not willing to make a prediction on when that will happen,
Fair enough.
but I tend to agree with your analysis that that is, to the extent Khamenei thinks that they have agency over their future, I think they're probably more likely than they were a month ago to go for the bomb
Hmm.
considerably. And
Hmm.
that's not to say we should also clarify. Look, like this is a situation where I think there was a genuinely difficult choice, and it is somewhat of Trump's own making because he withdrew from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And I think that is a criticism that is very valid and should be made over and over when people say, hey, this was not Trump's fault. We had a deal. That said, it was an imperfect deal. Even honest people in the Obama administration would acknowledge that it was a deeply imperfect deal. And it goes back well before that. I think the first site that was discovered, I think Natanz was discovered in 2002. And that the Iranians first became, a lot more interested. There was some interest under the Shah, but sort of after the Iran-Iraq War and what they saw the United States was able to do to the Iraqi military in Desert Storm. And I think it would be bad if Iran had a nuclear weapon. But the intelligence, by all accounts, had not changed when the Israelis did this and when Trump decided to get involved. The intelligence, as far as I've seen, is that they still had not decided to move forward and get a nuclear weapon. And it's not clear that this will actually do the trick over the long term. And as problematic as the JCPOA was in a lot of ways, the Iran nuclear deal, it was better than getting into a war in the Middle East or having a nuclear Iran. And I think we are closer to both of those than we were when we had the Iran nuclear deal in place.
Yeah. One wonders, this could be a subject for another show because we've already gone long, but one wonders what the Middle East looks like with a nuclear Iran.
I think
That's
we
a,
talked about this a bit, but yeah, I
yeah,
mean, you can explain some of the most troubling scenarios.
like then just unlimited proliferation among the Saudis, among the Emirates, maybe Egypt, the
Tur-
Israelis,
Turkey,
yeah,
maybe.
Turkey at this point. Yeah, everybody wants to join the club now. The Israelis, I would imagine, change their doctrine.
Oh, they,
Um,
they they would bring their bomb out of the basement for
they
sure.
might
Now,
test, yeah.
so I don't think any of these things are foregone conclusions. Like I
Yeah.
don't think it's automatic. Right? You're right. I think Erdogan has said this. The president of Turkey, MBS, and Saudi has definitely said, "Hey, if Iran gets the bomb, we have to get it too." It's not clear to me that those are foregone conclusions, but even if they're not, then you have an Iranian-Israeli nuclear dyad. What
Then,
Ron?
right, then it looks like a lot like India, Pakistan, right? And we've talked plenty about that and like the threshold between subconventional and nuclear warfare and how those things blend into each other.
I think the Iranians probably would be emboldened to escalate their asymmetric activities across the region.
Yeah,
Yeah, it would not be good. So in that sense, I have sympathy for the decision makers in place. I just don't know if this was the best route to go, and I certainly don't think it has solved the problem definitively.
no, I would think not.
And
Okay, can we?
sorry, can I make one more point?
Yeah, one more point, then
One
we'll
more
do book
point.
corner.
Okay. There's been a lot of comparisons of this to Israel's previous counter-proliferation strikes,
Osirak and
Osirak and
Syria.
the yeah, very very different set of conditions. I don't view those as analogous. Like yes, the purpose was counter-proliferation. Those were single exposed sites with far less developed programs against far weaker adversaries. Um, and so whether this turns out the same way that those did to me is very much in doubt. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, Iran looked at those and learned from them. Also, Iran is further away from Israel than Syria or Iraq. It's a much bigger place. It's harder to deal with, more powerful, as you said. Yeah, not very analogous. Okay, so that sucks. Book corner. I read How Countries Go Broke by Ray Dalio.
Oh wow.
Yeah, you
I
know who that is?
yes, I do. But
He's a big hedge fund guy, maybe the one of the biggest historically hedge fund guys. He started Bridgewater Associates, and he's also this guy who's kind of like an amateur scholar, and he has employed academics, I think teams of academics to go back and do a bunch of like world historical research to build models and understand how like the grand historical cycles and like all the way back to basically the early modern era, the Westphalian system. He has written about the ancient Chinese state system and how this applies to modern investing. And he's an interesting dude. He's an interesting cat. One thing he's not is a good writer.
oh
He's one of these guys who writes one sentence per paragraph, and
yeah, okay.
it's a long paragraph. The ideas, though, are interesting. So, what he is doing is he is boiling down every single sovereign debt crisis that he can locate. And he has a bunch of graphs basically laying out the pattern of events that he sees. There's a short term debt cycle and a long term debt cycle. And these interact with technology cycles, political cycles, geopolitical cycles, environmental cycles, right? So he has this complex system that he writes about in this book. And he goes into more detail on the Japanese, Chinese, and US cases. And I mean, for the purposes of this show, like it's interesting. It's worth reading. It's a tough read, I'll be honest with you, especially on Kindle because the graphs are very small and not in color. He's like, pay special attention to the purple line. And you're like, it's monochrome, right?
Yeah, man.
Anyway,
I need my hard copy.
yeah, you need your hard copy. And his point for the United States is basically the United States is indeed in trouble, but there is a pathway. There is a reasonable pathway to getting back on track. And it involves basically three levers. One lever is inflation, so lowering interest rates. Another lever is like getting control of the budget, cutting the budget. And yeah, the third lever, I think, is management of consumption, basically, and investment. So it's like
I don't like any of those for the United States right now.
yeah, it's like we could do this in such a way where we spread the pain over the different interest groups, right? And all we have to do is all get together, like reasonable people should get together in both parties. And yeah, I see the expression you're making, and just decide like this is the obvious way to do this, right? It's
I
like
just, yeah, I don't know. I remember following this back in like the first Obama presidency, and there was like the Simpson Bowles Commission, and they were like,
uh-huh.
yeah, like actually there's some sensible policies that could take care of this pretty quickly. And Congress was like, cool, we're not going to do any of that.
Yeah, no, yeah, we're not going to do that. So it's kind of like it's up to the Fed, right? At this point, which is kind of the conclusion we reached already in the other show. But it's worth reading, even if it's kind of depressing at the end because you're like, oh, we're never going to be able to do that, seemingly.
Okay. Maybe I'll check that out. That could be
Yeah,
interesting. And
how countries go broke.
it's got like a bit of a Paul Kennedy rise and fall of the great powers vibe to it.
Yeah, yeah. There's elements of that. Yeah,
I'm gonna save mine because I haven't finished reading it and I'm pretty excited to talk about it. So we'll
Okay,
we'll do
you
we'll
can't
do
give me a
that.
hint. No teasers.
I mean, I can tell you how I'll tell you the book and we'll talk about it next time. How's that?
Okay.
It's Kenneth Rogoff just wrote Our Dollar, Your Problem.
Oh yeah, no,
Uh,
I have heard of this. Yeah, I want to read
okay.
this too.
So yeah, I'll talk about it next time.
Awesome, dude. All right. Well,
Cool.
thank you for the lengthy discussion of
Hey,
a
you too,
very
man. I enjoyed it. Hopefully we didn't get too technical.
nah, it's a scary and depressing topic, but hey, we're professionals. This is what we do, right? Or at least you are.
Enjoyed the
Yeah.
conversation, man.
All right. Till next
All
time,
right, till
buddy.
next time. Later.
Later.